Admiral Park had spent 40 years sailing the stars. He had seen nebulae that burned with colors no human word could describe. He had watched twin suns rise over alien worlds. He had guided his ships through asteroid storms and solar flares, but nothing in his long life had prepared him for this moment. The Eternal Dawn was the pride of the Golden Fleet. She was 3 kilometers long, her hull painted white and gold, her solar sails spread wide like the wings of some great bird. 2,000 crew members called her home. She was beautiful in the way only human ships could be beautiful, built not just for function but for wonder. Stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the darkness ahead. The void ocean stretched before them, a region of space so thick with dark matter that it swallowed all light. For 300 years, humanity had known about this place. For 300 years, they had avoided it. The old map simply said forbidden and nothing more. But the trade routes were getting crowded. The colonies needed new paths. An admiral had been ordered to chart the edges of the forbidden zone. Lieutenant sat at her sensor station, her eyes fixed on screens that showed nothing but black. She was young, barely 30, but she was the best sensor operator in the fleet. If there was anything to find in this darkness, she would find it. "Anything?" asked. "Nothing yet, sir, just dark matter readings, dense, very dense." She paused. "Wait." Turned toward her. Something in her voice made his old heart beat faster. "I am getting movement," said slowly. Her fingers danced across her controls. Something big, very big, rising from below the galactic plane. "A ship." "No, sir, the signature is wrong. It is. I do not know what it is." Walked to her station and looked at her screens. The readings made no sense. The object was kilometers long. It was giving off heat, but also absorbing radiation at an impossible rate. And it was moving fast, rising up from the depths of the void ocean like something swimming toward the surface. "Send a message to Fleet Command," ordered. "Tell them we have contact with an unknown object. Request instructions." Before could respond, the lights on the bridge flickered. Every screen went white, then black, then white again. The Eternal Dawn shuddered like a small boat in a storm. "Sir," someone shouted. "Visual contact, port side." Turned to the main viewing window. What he saw stopped the breath in his chest. It was a dragon. He knew that word was wrong. This was not Earth. There were no dragons in space. But his human brain could not find any other word for the creature that rose from the darkness before him. It was serpentine, its body twisting and coiling through the void. Its scales were black as the space around it, but they shimmered with captured starlight. Its eyes, each one larger than the Eternal Dawn herself, burned with the fire of suns. It was ancient, knew this in his bones. This creature had been old when humanity's ancestors were still climbing down from trees. It had slept in the darkness between stars while humans learned to make fire, to build cities, to reach for the sky. And now it was awake. "All hands," said, his voice surprisingly steady. "Battle stations." The Eternal Dawn was not a warship. She was an exploration vessel built for discovery, not combat. But she had weapons and was not a man who gave up easily. The dragon turned its massive head toward them. For a moment, nothing happened. The creature simply looked at them with those burning eyes, as if studying an insect it had found crawling on its floor. Then it opened its mouth. The fire that came was not like any fire had ever seen. It was plasma, superheated matter that burned hotter than the core of a star. It crossed the distance between the dragon and the ship in less than a second. The Eternal Dawn's shields held for 3 seconds, then they failed. Felt the heat even through the bridge's armored walls. Alarms screamed. Crew members shouted. The beautiful white and gold hull began to melt. "Abandon ship," ordered. "All hands to escape pods now." Was still at her station, still working her controls with desperate speed. "Sir, I am detecting more movement, more of them, dozens of them, rising from the void." Looked back at the viewing window. She was right. The darkness was coming alive. More shapes were rising, more dragons waking from their ancient sleep. He counted 5, 10, 20, and then he stopped counting because it did not matter anymore. "Go," he told, "get to the pods." "Sir, you need to come too. I will be right behind you." It was a lie, and they both knew it. Someone had to stay on the bridge to give the escape pods time to launch. Someone had to keep the remaining weapons firing to distract the dragons. Had lived a good life. He had seen wonders. He was ready. Looked at him for a long moment. Then she saluted, turned, and ran. Sat down in his captain's chair. Through the viewing window he watched the dragons rising, rising, rising. There were so many of them. Where had they come from? How long had they slept in the darkness? And why were they waking now? He would never know the answers. But as the dragon fire washed over the eternal dawn, as his beautiful ship died around him, Admiral Park did something strange. He smiled. Because he knew something the dragons did not know. He knew humanity. He had served with humans for 40 years. He had seen them face impossible odds. He had seen them lose everything and start again. He had seen them turn defeat into victory through nothing but stubborn refusal to give up. The dragons were old. The dragons were powerful. The dragons had slept for millions of years and woken to find a universe they thought was theirs. But humanity was different. Humanity did not know how to surrender. Humanity did not accept extinction. Humanity, when pushed to the edge, pushed back harder than anything in the universe could imagine. The escape pods launched, carrying 400 survivors into the darkness. Among them was Lieutenant, her eyes full of tears but her hands steady on the controls. She watched the eternal dawn break apart behind her. She watched the dragons turn their attention to the fleeing pods. Most of the pods were destroyed, but 17 made it to the edge of the void ocean. 17 pods carrying 93 survivors who would tell the rest of humanity what they had seen. Was one of them. As her pod finally cleared the darkness, as normal stars appeared around her once more, she sent out a distress signal. Her voice was rough from crying, but her words were clear. "This is Lieutenant of the Eternal Dawn. We have made contact with hostile alien life forms in the void ocean. They are large, they are powerful, they have destroyed our ship. Admiral Park is dead. Most of our crew is dead, but some of us survived. We are coming home, and we need to warn everyone." She paused, looking back at the darkness behind her. Something is waking up out there, something old, and it is hungry. The message went out at the speed of light, racing toward the human colonies. The Age of Sail had 3 more months to live, but humanity did not know that yet. They did not know that their beautiful ships, their proud traditions, their peaceful expansion across the stars was about to end in fire and death. They would learn soon enough. 6 months after the eternal dawn burned, Commander Lee stood at the window of Refuge Station and watched another convoy die. The convoy was called the Hope of. It carried 12,000 refugees from the outer colonies, people who had lost their homes when the dragons came. They were so close to safety. The station was right there, just a few hours away. But the dragons did not care about hope or safety or how close you were to your destination. Counted 3 of them. They moved through space like snakes swimming through water, their massive bodies twisting and coiling. Their scales drank in the light from the convoy's solar sails. That was what attracted them, the scientists had figured out. The dragons fed on light, on radiation, on energy itself. And humanity's beautiful sailing ships were like bright torches in the darkness. The first dragon reached the lead ship. It did not even bother to breathe fire. It simply wrapped its body around the vessel and squeezed. The ship crumpled like paper. Air and people and debris spilled out into the void. Made herself watch. She had watched so many ships die in the past 6 months. She owed it to the dead to witness their end. Beside her, Ensign Minu was crying silently. He was young, barely 22. Before the dragons came, his biggest worry had been passing his navigation exams. Now he spent his days counting the dead. 12,000 more, he whispered. That brings the total to. Do not count, told him. Not yet, we count when it is over. When will it be over? Did not answer, she did not know. The Golden Fleet was gone. In 6 months, the dragons had destroyed more than 800 ships. They had burned colonies on 15 worlds. They had killed millions of people, maybe tens of millions. Nobody knew the exact number because nobody could count that high while still trying to survive. The dragons seemed to be everywhere at once. At first, humanity had thought there were only a few of them, then a few dozen. Now the best estimates said at least 50 of the creatures had risen from the void ocean, and more might be coming. Nobody knew how many were sleeping in that darkness. Nobody wanted to find out. The last ship in the convoy exploded. The dragons circled the wreckage for a moment, feeding on the dying energy of the fusion cores. Then they turned and swam back toward the void ocean, satisfied for now. They will be back, Minyu said. They always come back. Nodded, the dragons hunted in patterns. They would strike, feed, and return to the darkness to rest. Then they would come out again, hungry, searching for more light to devour. The scientists said they were like sharks, following the scent of blood across an ocean. Except their ocean was space, and the blood was the light that humanity needed to survive. A message came through on's communicator. She read it and felt something cold settle in her stomach. What is it? Minyu asked. Fleet Command is ordering a full retreat. All remaining ships are to fall back to the inner colonies. We are giving up the outer territories. Minyu stared at her. But there are still people out there, colonies that have not been evacuated yet. I know. We cannot just leave them. We do not have a choice. Our ships cannot fight the dragons. Every time we try, we lose more ships, more people. Fleet Command has decided that we need to protect what we can and let the rest go. It was the right decision. Knew that. When you were losing a war, you did not throw away your remaining forces in hopeless battles. You pulled back, regrouped, and tried to find a way to fight that might actually work. But knowing it was right did not make it hurt any less. Over the next 3 weeks, supervised the evacuation of Refuge Station. They packed people onto every ship they had, cramming them in like cargo. The ships ran dark, their solar sails furled, moving on minimal power to avoid attracting the dragons. It was slow and dangerous, but it worked. Most of them made it to the inner colonies. Was on the last ship out. As they pulled away from the station, she looked back at the home she was abandoning. Refuge Station had been her post for 5 years. She had raised her children there, buried her husband there. Now it was just another piece of debris floating in space. The inner colonies were chaos. Millions of refugees crowded into stations and planets that were not built to hold them. Food was running short. Medicine was running shorter. And everyone was afraid all the time because they knew the dragons would come eventually. Found herself assigned to a planning committee, a group of military officers and scientists trying to figure out how to survive. They met in a small room on New Station, arguing for hours about strategies that all seemed hopeless. We could try to negotiate, one scientist suggested. The dragons are clearly intelligent. Maybe we can communicate with them. We have tried, Admiral replied. He was an old man, the highest-ranking officer left alive after so many deaths. They do not respond to any signals we send. Either they cannot understand us, or they simply do not care. Then we fight, a younger officer said. We build bigger weapons. We hit them with everything we have. Our weapons do nothing to them, another scientist pointed out. Their scales absorb energy. Missiles, lasers, plasma cannons, nothing gets through. We need something else. Like what? Nobody had an answer. Listened to the arguments go round and round. She thought about about the eternal dawn, about all the ships and people they had lost. She thought about her husband, who had died in the first wave of attacks. She thought about her children, sleeping in a crowded refugee shelter, wondering if they would live to see another year. And she thought about humanity. They had come so far, from caves to cities, from Earth to the stars. They had built an empire that spanned hundreds of worlds. They had created art and music and science and philosophy. They had sailed the cosmic winds on ships of light and gold. Now they were hiding in holes, waiting to die. Stood up, everyone looked at her. "We are thinking about this wrong," she said. "We keep trying to save the Age of Sail, but the Age of Sail is over. The dragons ended it. We cannot go back to what we were." "Then what do you suggest?" Admiral asked. "We become something new. Our ships are beautiful, but beauty does not win wars. Our solar sails are elegant, but elegance does not kill dragons. We need to throw away everything we thought we knew about spacefaring and start over." "Start over how?" Walk to the window. Outside she could see the refugee ships floating in formation, their sails furled, their lights dim. They looked like dead things. "We stop being sailors," she said, "and we start being soldiers. We build ships that are not beautiful. We build ships that are ugly and fast and strong. We build ships that can take a hit and keep fighting. We build ships that can kill." "We have never built ships like that," someone objected. "We do not have the designs, the materials, the expertise." "Then we learn. Humanity learned how to sail the stars. We can learn how to fight in them." Turned back to face the room. "The dragons think they are hunting prey. They think we are just food waiting to be eaten. But we are not prey. We never have been. We are the species that hunted mammoths with sticks. We are the species that tamed fire and split atoms. We are the species that refused to stay on one planet because we wanted to touch the stars." She looked at each face in the room, one by one. The dragons made a mistake when they woke up. They thought the universe was still theirs, but we have been here for 300 years now. This is our home, and we do not give up our home without a fight. The room was silent. Then Admiral slowly nodded. "What do you need?" he asked. Told him, and humanity began to change. The shipyards of Cluster had never been quiet. For 200 years, they had built the most beautiful vessels in human space. Artists and engineers worked side by side, creating ships that were as much sculpture as machine. Every hull was painted by hand. Every sail was woven with care. The ships that came from were famous across the colonies for their grace. Now the shipyard screamed with a different kind of work. Chief Engineer Bay stood on a platform above the main construction bay, watching her teams tear apart a half-finished sailing vessel. The workers moved fast, stripping away the delicate solar collectors, the ornamental hull plates, the elegant curves that served no purpose but beauty. What remained was a skeleton of metal and wire, ugly and bare. "Bring in the armor plates," ordered through her communicator, "and get me more welders. I want this frame covered by end of shift." Shin, her young assistant, appeared at her side with a data pad. "The latest specifications from Commander Lee. She wants the main cannon mounted forward, not rear." Took the pad and studied the changes. "That will throw off the balance. The ship will be harder to control." She says control does not matter if we cannot kill dragons. Laughed. It was a tired sound. She had not slept more than 3 hours a night since the project began 2 months ago. None of them had. There was no time for sleep when the fate of humanity depended on building ships that could fight monsters. "Fine, forward mount it is. But tell her if this thing flies like a brick, that is her problem." The first new ship was taking shape in the construction bay below. It had no name yet, just a designation, Prototype 1. It was 300 meters long, which was small by the standards of the old sailing ships. But where the sailing ships had been sleek and light, Prototype 1 was thick and heavy. Its hull was covered in layers of ablative armor designed to absorb energy. Its engines were not solar sails but fusion drives, fed by reactors that could run for years without refueling. And it had weapons, so many weapons. The old sailing ships had carried small defensive guns, enough to scare off pirates or clear debris from their path. Prototype, one had that could accelerate tungsten slugs to a fraction of light speed. It had missile bays loaded with warheads designed to penetrate dragon scales. It had a main cannon that drew power directly from the fusion core, capable of firing a beam hot enough to cut through asteroid rock. It was ugly. It was brutal. The old admirals who came to inspect it called it an abomination, a betrayal of everything humanity had built in the stars. Did not care what they called it. She only cared if it could kill dragons. Chief Engineer. A new voice crackled through her communicator. This is Commander Lee. I am coming down to see the prototype. Meet me at the main bay. Understood, Commander. Made her way down to the construction floor. Commander Lee was already there when she arrived, standing in front of Prototype 1 with her arms crossed. She had changed in the past 2 months. The woman who had once watched convoys burn with tears in her eyes was gone. In her place was someone harder, sharper, like a blade that had been heated in fire and hammered into shape. It is smaller than I expected, said. Size does not matter against the dragons, replied. Our big ships die just as fast as our small ones. What matters is speed and firepower. Show me the weapons. Spent the next hour walking through every system on the ship. The commander asked questions about everything, from the thickness of the armor to the targeting algorithms for the. She was not an engineer, but she understood war. She knew what mattered in a fight. When can it fly? Asked finally. 2 more weeks to finish construction, another month for testing. We may not have a month. Intelligence reports say a dragon has been spotted moving toward the cluster. It could be here in 3 weeks. Felt her stomach tighten. Then we work faster. They worked around the clock, pushed her teams harder than she had ever pushed anyone. People collapsed from exhaustion and were carried to medical bays, then came back as soon as they could stand. Nobody complained. Everyone knew what was at stake. 12 days later, Prototype 1 launched for its first test flight. Watched from the control center as the ugly ship lifted away from the shipyard. It flew badly, just as she had predicted. The forward-mounted cannon made it nose-heavy, and the pilots had to fight the controls every second. But it flew. And when they tested the weapons on a dead asteroid, the results made everyone in the control center cheer. The punched holes through solid rock. The missiles blew craters the size of houses. The main cannon sliced the asteroid in half with a single shot. Not bad, said quietly. Not bad at all. But the real test came 5 days later. The Dragon arrived at dawn local station time. It was one of the smaller ones, only 2 kilometers long, but that still made it larger than anything humanity had ever fought. It came out of the darkness like a nightmare, its scales gleaming, its eyes burning with hungry light. The Dragon had come for the shipyards. It had smelled the energy of the fusion reactors, the light of the construction lasers. It thought it was coming to feed on helpless prey. It was wrong. Prototype 1 launched to meet it. Was not on board. She wanted to be, but her commanders had forbidden it. So she watched from the control center, her hands gripping the console until her knuckles turned white. Target in range, the pilot reported. His name was a young man who had volunteered for this mission knowing he might not survive. Engaging. The fired first. Streams of tungsten slugs crossed the distance to the Dragon in seconds. Most of them bounced off the creature's scales, but a few found gaps in the armor, the soft spots where the plates met. The Dragon screamed, a sound that somehow traveled through the vacuum, carried by radio waves it generated in its fury. It is turning toward us, reported. His voice was calm, beginning evasive maneuvers. The Dragon breathed fire. The plasma stream missed Prototype 1 by less than 100 meters. The ship's hull heated from the near miss, but the armor held. Launching missiles. 12 missiles streaked toward the Dragon. The creature tried to dodge, but it was too slow. 8 of the missiles struck home. their warheads detonating against the dragon's hide. The explosions were small, but they were enough to crack the scales, to open wounds in flesh that had not felt pain in millions of years. The dragon screamed again. It turned to flee. "No," whispered, "do not let it escape." Heard her through the command channel. Understood, Commander, pursuing. Prototype 1 was fast. Faster than any sailing ship, faster than the dragon expected. Pushed the engines to their limit, closing the distance as the wounded creature tried to reach the safety of the darkness. Main cannon charged and ready. Fire! The beam struck the dragon in the back of its head. The creature's ancient skull, which had survived asteroid impacts and the death of stars, could not survive the focused fury of human engineering. The dragon went limp, its body drifting, its eyes going dark. In the control center, nobody spoke for a long moment. Then someone started clapping. Others joined in. Soon the whole room was cheering, crying, hugging each other. They had done it. They had killed a dragon. Did not cheer. She watched the dragon's corpse floating in space, and she thought about all the people who had died in the past months, all the ships that had burned, all the colonies that had fallen. One dragon was dead. 40 or 50 more were still out there. But it was a start. She turned to face the room. The cheering died down as people saw her expression. "Begin construction on Prototype 2, she ordered, and 3 and 4. I want 10 ships ready within the year, 20 by the year after that." 10 ships, Commander, we barely finished one. Then we build more shipyards, we train more engineers, we recruit more pilots. Eyes were hard. The dragons have been hunting us for 6 months. Now we are going to hunt them, and we are not going to stop until every single one of them is dead. She looked at the image of the dead dragon one more time. Humanity remembers how to kill. We are going to remind the universe why that matters. 5 years had passed since the first rising. 5 years of war, of death, of desperate fighting. 5 years of humanity learning how to be predators again. Captain stood on the bridge of the Hammer of and stared into the darkness of the void ocean. Behind him, 27 other ships waited in formation. They were not beautiful ships. They were dented, patched with mismatched armor from a dozen repairs. They looked like what they were, weapons that had seen too much war. "All ships report ready," Lieutenant O said from the navigation station. She was small and quiet, with steady hands and a mind that could calculate jump trajectories faster than any computer. She had joined the fleet 2 years ago after her home station was destroyed by a dragon. Like everyone else on this mission, she had lost people she loved. Like everyone else, she was here for revenge. "Send the signal," ordered. "We go in." The fleet moved forward into the void ocean. For 300 years, humanity had avoided this place. The old maps called it forbidden, and everyone had obeyed. Now understood why. The darkness here was different from normal space. It pressed against the ship's hull like a living thing. The sensors filled with static. The crew grew quiet, nervous, as if they could feel ancient eyes watching them from the shadows. "Stay sharp," told his crew. "They know we are here." The plan was simple. Humanity had spent 5 years killing dragons that came out of the void ocean to hunt. But for every dragon they killed, 2 more seemed to wake up and take its place. The scientists estimated that dozens, maybe hundreds of the creatures were still sleeping in the darkness. As long as they kept waking up, humanity would keep fighting. The war would never end. So and his fleet were going to end it themselves. They were going to find where the dragons slept and destroy them before they could wake. It was a suicide mission. Everyone knew that. But 200 volunteers had stepped forward anyway, people who had lost everything and had nothing left but the desire to make the dragons pay. "Contact," reported, her voice tight. 3 signatures bearing 275 Mark 12, big ones, moving to intercept. "Show me." The tactical display lit up with 3 red dots, each one representing a dragon. They were rising from below, just like the first dragons had risen 5 years ago. The creatures had sensed the fleet's energy signatures and were coming to feed. "This is what we wanted," reminded his crew. "Launch the bait." From the fleet's cargo holds, a dozen fusion bombs floated out into space. They were modified to burn slow and bright, releasing energy in a steady stream instead of a single explosion. To the dragons, they looked like wounded ships, helpless prey waiting to be devoured. The three dragons changed course, heading for the bait instead of the fleet. Harpoon teams move into position. 5 small ships broke away from the formation. They were called harpoon ships, though they looked more like flying needles. Each one carried a single weapon, a massive spear tipped with a needle designed to pierce dragon scales and inject a neurotoxin developed from the bodies of dead dragons. The first dragon reached the bait. It wrapped its massive body around the fusion bomb, drinking in the energy, distracted by its meal. It did not notice the harpoon ship approaching from behind. The spear punched through the dragon's scales at the base of its skull. The creature screamed, thrashing, but the neurotoxin was already spreading through its body. Within 30 seconds, the dragon went still. Its eyes dimmed. Its body began to drift. "One down," said, "2 to go." The second dragon was harder. It saw the harpoon ship coming and turned to fight. Its fire breath caught the small vessel, melting it to slag in seconds. But 3 more harpoon ships were already closing in. One of them died, but the other 2 made it through. Their spears struck the dragon in the chest and throat. The creature thrashed and screamed, but it could not escape the poison spreading through its ancient body. The third dragon tried to run. It was the of the 3, or maybe just the most afraid. It turned away from the bait and dove back toward the depths of the void ocean. "Do not let it escape," ordered. "All ships pursue." The fleet chased the dragon down into the darkness. The sensors got worse the deeper they went. The crew grew more nervous. Nobody knew what was waiting in the depths, but was not going to let this dragon warn the others. He pushed his engines to their limit, closing the distance meter by meter. In range, his weapons officer reported. "Fire!" The hammer of roared. Tungsten slugs tore through the darkness, striking the fleeing dragon in the tail, the back, the wings. The creature stumbled in its flight, slowing down. "Main cannon ready." "Fire!" The beam struck the dragon between its shoulders. The creature's spine shattered. It tumbled through the void, broken, dying, its fire going out. Watched it die and felt nothing. He had stopped feeling things about dragon deaths a long time ago. They were just targets now, problems to be solved, threats to be eliminated. "3 down," said. "But Captain, we lost 4 ships in that fight. We are down to 24. "I know, keep moving forward." The fleet pressed deeper into the void ocean. They found more dragons as they went, some awake, some still sleeping. The awake ones they killed in battle. The sleeping ones they killed where they lay, firing missiles into their dormant bodies before they could open their eyes. It was not honorable, it was not fair, but did not care about honor or fairness. He cared about winning. After 3 days in the void ocean, the fleet reached something none of them had expected: a structure. It rose out of the darkness like a mountain of black stone. It was enormous, bigger than any space station humanity had ever built, bigger than some moons. Its surface was covered in shapes that looked almost like writing, symbols in a language that no human could read. And carved into its walls, like bees in a hive, were thousands of sleeping dragons. "Mother of Stars," whispered. Stared at the structure. This was where they came from. This was their home, their nest, their birthplace. And from the number of bodies he could see, this was just one nest of many. "How many?" he asked. Ran the calculations. Visible dragons approximately 800, but the structure is large. There could be more inside. 800 dragons. Humanity's fleet had killed maybe 60 in 5 years of war. If all these dragons woke up at once, there would be no stopping them. Target the structure, ordered. Sir, we cannot kill 800 dragons one at a time, but we can bring down the walls around them, collapse the structure, bury them in the rubble. He turned to face his crew. This is what we came here for. This is why we volunteered for a one-way mission. We are going to destroy that nest, even if it costs us everything. Nobody argued. Nobody tried to run. They had all known from the beginning that they might not go home. The fleet opened fire on the structure. Missiles streaked across the darkness. Slugs tore into the ancient stone. The main cannons of a dozen ships burned lines of destruction across the walls. The dragons began to wake up. They poured out of the structure like angry insects, hundreds of them, their eyes burning with fury. They fell on the fleet with fire and claws and teeth. Ships exploded. Crews died. The darkness filled with screaming and flame. But the fleet kept firing at the structure. They had one job and they were going to finish it. Watched his ships die around him. The hammer of shook as dragon fire washed over its hull. Alarms screamed. Crew members shouted damage reports. Structure integrity failing, reported through the chaos. It is coming down. The ancient nest, millions of years old, began to collapse. Huge pieces of stone broke away and fell into the darkness. Dragons who had not yet escaped were crushed beneath the rubble. Others tried to flee but were caught by falling debris. Antimatter charge ready, the weapons officer said. Nodded, target the core of the structure, fire. The charge launched. It flew straight into the heart of the collapsing nest. The explosion lit up the void ocean like a new sun. The structure shattered completely, sending debris flying in all directions. Dragons caught in the blast were torn apart. The ancient nest, home to thousands of sleeping monsters, ceased to exist. When the light faded, only 3 human ships remained. The hammer of was one of them, barely. Half its hull was gone, half its crew was dead, but was still alive, and so were 47 other survivors. Damage report, said weakly. We are not going to make it home, Captain. Engines are failing. Life support is damaged. We have maybe 6 hours. Nodded, he had expected this. Send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them what we found. Tell them what we did. Tell them there may be more nests out there, but this one is gone. He paused. Tell them we did our job. Sent the message. Then she turned to look at her captain. It was worth it, she said, was it not? Thought about the 800 dragons they had killed today. He thought about the millions of humans those dragons would have slaughtered if they had ever woken up. Yes, he said, it was worth it. They sat together in the dying ship, watching the darkness of the void ocean, waiting for the end. Behind them, the rubble of the dragon nest drifted silently through space. Humanity had struck back, and the dragons, for the first time in millions of years, had learned what it felt like to be prey. 20 years. That was how long the war lasted. 20 years of fighting, dying, and refusing to give up. Admiral Lee stood in the Hall of Remembrance on New Earth, looking up at the skull that hung from the ceiling. It was the skull of the first dragon, the one that had killed Admiral Park and the crew of the Eternal Dawn. It had taken 15 years to hunt that creature down. It had cost 200 ships and 10,000 lives. But in the end, humanity had found it sleeping in a dark corner of space and had killed it while it dreamed. The skull was enormous, almost 100 meters long. Its empty eye sockets stared down at the people walking below, a reminder of what humanity had faced and what humanity had overcome. Admiral, a voice came from behind her. The ceremony is about to begin. Turned, General stood in the doorway dressed in his formal uniform. He was old now, his hair white, his face marked by scars from battles long past. He walked with a limp from an injury that had never healed properly. But his eyes were still sharp, still fierce. I did not expect to see you here, said. I thought you were still in the outer territories. I was, but I had to come back for this. I had to see it through to the end. They had all thought was dead, 20 years ago. His last transmission from the void ocean had sounded like a final goodbye. But somehow, against all odds, a rescue ship had found the wreckage of the hammer of 3 days after the battle, and 18 other survivors had been floating in emergency suits, almost out of air but still alive. He had gone back to fighting as soon as he recovered. He had spent the next 15 years leading missions into the void ocean, hunting down nests, destroying dragons wherever he found them. He had become a legend, the man who went into the darkness and always came back. "Is it really over?" asked. "The last deep scan finished this morning. No movement in the void ocean, no energy signatures, nothing alive in there anymore." Paused. "We killed them all." Nodded slowly. She had been waiting to hear those words for 20 years. She had imagined how she would feel when she finally heard them. But now that the moment was here, she felt mostly tired. "So many people died," she said quietly. "Yes, but more survived, because of what we did." They walked together out of the Hall of Remembrance and into the main plaza. Thousands of people had gathered for the ceremony, filling the open space and spilling out into the surrounding streets. They had come from all over human space to witness this moment, the official declaration of victory, the end of the Dragon War. Took her place on the stage beside the other leaders who had guided humanity through the war. There were not many of them left. Most had died in battle or from old age. She was one of the last survivors of the original generation, the people who had watched the age of sail end and had decided to build something new. "Citizens of humanity," the president began, his voice amplified to reach the entire crowd. 20 years ago we faced extinction. Creatures from the darkness rose to destroy us. They burned our ships, killed our people, and threatened to end everything we had built. The crowd was silent. Everyone remembered. Everyone had lost someone. But we did not give up. We did not surrender. We fought back with everything we had. And today I am proud to announce that the last dragon has been killed. The void ocean is empty. The war is over." The cheering started slowly, then built into a roar that seemed to shake the ground. People cried, laughed, hugged each other. After 20 years of fear, they were finally free. Did not cheer. She watched the crowd and thought about everything they had lost. The age of sail was gone forever. The beautiful ships, the golden sails, the elegant traditions that humanity had built over 3 centuries, all of it had burned in dragon fire. The culture that survived was harder, fiercer, less interested in beauty than in survival. They would never go back to what they had been. But they had survived. That was what mattered. Against impossible odds, against creatures that had ruled the darkness for millions of years, humanity had survived. After the ceremony, found herself standing alone at the edge of the plaza. She was looking up at the sky, watching the ships pass overhead. They were the new ships, the ones that had been built for war. Ugly and strong, with thick armor and powerful weapons. They were nothing like the graceful sailing vessels of her youth. "Admiral." She turned. A young woman stood behind her, wearing the uniform of a junior officer. She had bright eyes and an eager expression, the look of someone who had grown up hearing stories about the war but had never lived through it. "I am Ensign Bay," the young woman said, "daughter of Chief Engineer Bay." Smiled. Had died 8 years ago, killed when a dragon attacked the shipyard where she was working. But her daughter had lived and had grown up, and had joined the fleet that her mother had helped build. "Your mother was a great woman," said. "The first dragon killer ships were her design. Without her, we would not have survived." "I know. She used to tell me stories about those days. About you, about Captain, about all the people who refused to give up." Paused. "I have a question if you do not mind." "Ask." "What happens now? The war is over. The dragons are dead. What do we do next?" Looked back up at the sky. The ships were still passing overhead, heading out to the stars. Not to fight anymore, just to explore, to discover, to see what else was out there. "We go back out," she said. "Not as sailors, not as soldiers, as whatever we have become. We keep exploring, we keep building, we keep reaching for things that seem impossible. Why? Because that is what humans do. We faced extinction and we survived. We faced monsters and we killed them. Now we face the future and we will make it ours. Put her hand on the young woman's shoulder. Your mother understood that. She did not build those ships because she wanted to destroy things. She built them because she wanted humanity to live long enough to create new wonders. Nodded slowly. I think I understand. Good, because you are the future now. My generation fought the war. Your generation gets to decide what comes after. They stood together in silence, watching the ships cross the sky. The sun was setting, painting the clouds in shades of gold and red. It was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with dragons or war or death. That night had dinner with and a few other old friends. They told stories about the war, about people who had died, about battles won and lost. They laughed and cried and drank too much. At the end of the evening, raised his glass one last time. To the fallen, he said, to everyone who died so that the rest of us could live. To the fallen, the others echoed. They drank. The night grew late. One by one, the old warriors said their goodbyes and went home. Was the last to leave. She walked through the empty streets of New Earth, past memorials and monuments, past buildings that had been rebuilt after dragon attacks, past statues of heroes who had given their lives in the war. She stopped at a small garden at the edge of the city. This was where her husband was buried, along with thousands of others who had died in the early years of the war. She sat down on a bench and looked at the stars. We did it, she said softly. We survived. The dragons are gone. Humanity is safe. The stars did not answer. They never did, but liked to think that somewhere out there the spirits of the fallen were watching, that they knew their sacrifices had not been wasted. She sat there for a long time, an old woman alone with her memories. Around her, the city slept peacefully, no longer afraid of fire from the sky. In the morning, the first ships of the new exploration fleet would launch. They would head out into the unknown, looking for new worlds, new wonders, new challenges. Humanity was done being prey. They were ready to be explorers again. And if anything else rose from the darkness, if any other ancient horror woke from its long sleep, humanity would be ready. They had learned how to fight. They had learned how to win. They had learned that no enemy, no matter how old or powerful, could stand against a species that simply refused to die. The age of sail was over. The age of dragons had come and gone. The age of humanity was just beginning. Smiled and closed her eyes. Tomorrow was a new day, and for the first time in 20 years, it was a day without dragons. That was enough. That was everything.